2025. It was supposed to be the year aviation technology reached new heights of safety. Instead, as we look back on the last 12 months, it feels like the year the sky fell. From the frozen runways of Canada to the crowded streets of India, from a quiet neighborhood in Philadelphia to the cargo hubs of Kentucky, we saw machines fail in ways engineers said was impossible. We saw weather turn airports into graveyards, and we saw miracles rising from the ashes where no one should have survived. We have spent the last 5 videos meticulously analyzing the tragic crash of Greg Biffle's N257BW. We know the story. A racing legend, a dark night, a rough engine that wasn't there. We know he died fighting a ghost, a phantom failure created by his own disoriented mind. But to understand the true cruelty of aviation, we have to look at the pilots who fought real monsters this year. Why did the pilots of a UPS cargo jet die when their engine literally detached from the wing? Why did a Delta regional jet flip upside down in a blizzard, yet everyone walked away alive? Why did a state-of-the-art Dreamliner fall out of the sky in India, killing 260 people in the deadliest crash of the decade? And why did a Learjet ambulance perform a death dive identical to Greg Biffle's, just weeks apart? Today, on the Air Debrief, we are opening the 2025 case files. We are going to analyze the 4 headlines that defined this deadly year. We will compare the tragic fate of Greg Biffle with the chaotic reality of the world around him. We will separate the bad luck from the bad decisions. This is not just a recap. This is an autopsy of 2025. Let's begin with the most terrifying mechanical failure of the year. November 4th, 2025. UPS Airlines Flight 2976. A McDonnell Douglas MD-11 freighter, the workhorse of the cargo world, climbing out of Louisville, Kentucky on what should have been a routine flight. Seconds after rotation, catastrophe struck. The number 1 engine didn't just fail. It didn't just catch fire. It physically detached from the wing. The pylons sheared. The massive turbofan engine fell to earth. But on its way down, it likely struck the horizontal stabilizer or damaged the hydraulic lines. The pilots in that cockpit were instantly wrestling with a machine that had become aerodynamically unstable. The center of gravity shifted violently. The lift on the left wing evaporated. Now, think about Greg Biffle for a moment. In his cockpit, Biffle and his co-pilot were panicked by a rough engine. They heard a noise. They felt a vibration. They turned back in fear. But let's look at the physics. Biffle's engines were still attached. They were producing thrust. His wings were symmetrical. His hydraulics were pressurized. His plane was, by every definition, flyable. The crew of UPS 2976 didn't have that luxury. They were flying a crippled beast, a true unflyable condition. Whatever inputs they made on the yoke likely didn't matter, because the control surfaces were gone. Both crews died. Both planes were destroyed. But the difference is heartbreaking. The UPS pilots were passengers in a dying machine, fighting physics they couldn't beat. Greg Biffle was the captain of a healthy machine, fighting a mind he couldn't trust. UPS 2976 proves that sometimes the plane does break. And when it breaks that badly, even the best pilot in the world is just a passenger. Now, let's look at the only miracle on our list, and perhaps the most important lesson on survivability. February 17th, 2025, Toronto, Canada. Delta Connection Flight 4819, a Bombardier CRJ 900 battling a ferocious winter storm. Winds were gusting to 40 knots. Visibility was near zero due to blowing snow. This is exactly the kind of weather Greg Biffle feared, the kind of sensory deprivation that triggers disorientation. The landing was hard, the crosswind caught the wing. And then, in a scene straight out of a nightmare, the entire fuselage flipped upside down. Imagine being a passenger inside that tube. The world spins. You are hanging from your seatbelt. The sound of metal grinding on asphalt is deafening. Sparks are flying. Fuel is igniting. By all historical logic, this crash, a rollover with fire, should have been a mass casualty event. But watch the aftermath. All 80 people on board survived. Not a single fatality. Why? Partly, it was the structural integrity of the modern fuselage. Even upside down, The tube held its shape, protecting the survival space inside. But mostly, it was the response time. The crash happened on the airport. Fire crews were spraying foam within seconds of the aircraft coming to a halt. The golden hour of survival was maximized. Now, contrast this with Greg Biffle. He crashed miles away from the airport in the dark woods of North Carolina. Even if he had survived the initial impact, there were no fire trucks waiting, no paramedics nearby. No one even knew exactly where he was for hours. Delta 4819 teaches us a crucial lesson. Where you crash is sometimes just as important as how you crash. The Delta passengers were saved by the system, the infrastructure of a major airport. Greg Biffle died in the wilderness, the lonely void of general aviation. If there is one accident in 2025 that mirrors the Greg Biffle crash perfectly, it is this one. January 31st, 2025, Philadelphia. A Learjet 55 air ambulance. Why is this comparison so important? Because the Learjet 55 and Greg Biffle's Citation II are siblings in the aviation world. They are both legacy business jets. High performance, fast, unforgiving. On board, a pediatric patient, a mother, pilots, and medics. They were on a mission of mercy. Look at the trajectory. This wasn't a glide. This wasn't a flat spin like the Vopass crash in Brazil. This was a lawn dart, a vertical dive. Witnesses described it as falling out of the sky like a missile. Just like Greg Biffle, this Learjet impacted with high energy. Just like Biffle, there was no distress call. Just like Biffle, it happened suddenly during a critical phase of flight. While the ntsb investigation is still ongoing, the flight profile strongly suggests a spatial disorientation event, or a high-altitude stall, that led to a loss of control in flight. It is a chilling reminder. These sleek private jets are built for speed. They are not gliders. If you lose situational awareness in a Learjet or a Citation, the aircraft can enter a dive that exceeds its structural limits in seconds. The pilots of the Learjet, much like Biffle, likely never saw the ground coming until the very last moment. The physics of a vertical impact are non-negotiable. There is no survival space. There is no miracle. Finally, we arrive at the darkest headline of 2025, June 12th. Air India Flight 171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, the most advanced computerized plane in the sky, crashed shortly after takeoff into a college dormitory. 260 dead. This crash puts everything else into perspective. Greg Biffle was a tragedy of 4 people. UPS was a tragedy of 3. Learjet was a tragedy of 6. But Air India 171 was a tragedy of a nation. Early reports suggest a confusing discrepancy. The throttle levers were at idle, but the flight data recorder showed the engines were commanded to full power. This hints at a complex man versus machine conflict, a battle for control between the pilot and the automation. This offers a fascinating contrast to Greg Biffle. Biffle died in an old-school cockpit with analog gauges. He was confused by his own senses, his inner ear telling him he was climbing when he was diving. The pilots of Air India may have been confused by their computer, the logic of the aircraft contradicting their inputs. It shows that whether you are flying a 40-year-old Citation or a brand new Dreamliner, the risk is always there. Complexity does not always equal safety. Sometimes technology solves one problem, like reliability, but creates a new one, like confusion. 2025 will be remembered as the year the aviation world got a massive wake-up call. We saw an engine fall off a plane in Kentucky and realized that sometimes metal just breaks. We saw a plane flip over in Canada and learned that a quick response can cheat death. We saw a medical mission end in a fireball in Philly, reminding us of the unforgiving nature of high-performance jets. And we saw a Dreamliner turn into a nightmare in India, proving that even the best technology isn't foolproof. And amidst all these global headlines lies the story of Greg Biffle, a man who wasn't killed by a falling engine. He wasn't killed by a computer glitch. He wasn't killed by a blizzard flip. He was killed by the oldest enemy of them all, the human mind. As we close the book on 2025, let's remember the lesson of the Delta flight in Toronto. Even when the world flips upside down, there is hope. But only if you are prepared. Only if the system holds. And only if you keep your head when everything else is spinning. Fly safe, trust your instruments, and respect the physics. Thank you for watching the Air Debrief. See you in 2026.